She's like the female James Bond.
She's safety chick.
The safety chick.
I love that safety chick. That's what
She calls
it is.
herself the safety chick.
I was a stalking victim, having to learn every possible aspect of personal safety to stay alive.
The safety chick. We love her.
Yeah.
Hey, Kathleen Gallagher here, the safety chick. And Target Corporation executives said they'll begin closing all 6 of their San Francisco stores earlier than normal because of the city's rampant shoplifting and thefts. The company said there's been such an alarming rise in crime at their San Francisco stores that they will reduce nighttime hours. Another shoplifting incident was captured on video at a Walgreens in San Francisco. The video captured by a reporter shows a suspected shoplifter taking items off the shelf and putting them into a black garbage bag. The suspect continues even as 3 people, including the store's security guard, begin filming on their cell phones just feet away. The suspect then puts the bag of items on his bike and rides towards the guard, who attempts to grab at the bag but allows the person to pass. The shoplifter then leaves the store with the bag on the bike, and no one even tried to stop him. And most recently, a group of 10 masked people ran into the Neiman Marcus on Union Square. I've shopped there thousands of times in broad daylight and grabbed armfuls of designer purses, ran out of the store to waiting cars down the block. While there were dozens of people filming the whole thing on their phones, no one did one thing to stop them. Security and law enforcement was nowhere to be found. San Francisco is not the only city experiencing this brazen crime wave. Most cities in America are also experiencing a rise in homicides, gun violence, robbery, and assaults. But why is there such a rise in crime? What is it going to take to get our cities and neighborhoods back to law and order? My colleague and dear friend, Dr. Paul Viollis, is here to shed light on why this is happening and what it's going to take to get our streets and cities back to law and order. Paul has spent over 3 decades, actually almost 4, in law enforcement. He was 5 when he started, and global security, and is the CEO of Viollis Group International. So welcome, Paul. I can't believe that you're actually I am on the interviewing end of this show. I'm on this show. You're on that side, because usually it's the other way around. So I'm completely in control of this entire podcast. I just want you to know that.
I want you to know that I'm so happy for you guys, and I've been watching your show, and it's fantastic. And it's long overdue. And we talked about that years ago, and it's long overdue. And the public really needs what you're providing. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, you're the one that made me do it. At first, I procrastinated for 5 years?
Yeah.
So it's all good. It's all good.
You know what? People need to hear what you have to say, Kathleen. It's so important. It really is.
Well, people need to hear what you have to say today, because this is, San Francisco's my hometown. I mean, Chicago, all the shootings there, I think people are kind of numb to that. New York,
Right.
We know there's crime there, but this is my hood. I shop at that Neiman Marcus all the time. I've been to that
Right.
Walgreens. So it's unbelievable. And you know what? I was listening to an interview this AM with Joe Grimaldi, the vice president of the Fraternal Order of Police. And he was saying, listen to this, that just last weekend alone, 554 people were shot, 30 of them were kids, 128 were murdered, and 4 police officers were shot. That's just in one weekend. What is going on?
I was listening to your open. It was very powerful and poignant, with no surprise. And there's one word that answers your question. It's accountability, or I may say the lack thereof. And what we've done in this country is we've taken accountability out of the equation. And that's the thing. When we take a look at what's happening statistically, you look at the empirical data of the number of shootings, what we keep doing is we keep blaming it on guns, and we're not blaming it on decisions, choices, and people. Lack of accountability, district attorneys not doing their job, laws being created to get rid of cash bail and saying that there are far too many people that don't have enough money to make bail. How about this? Here's a news flash. Don't worry about it if you don't have any money, just don't break the law. Well, unfortunately, Kathleen, we've switched to this, and now we are in the genesis. Very important. We are in the genesis of feeling the pain of those decisions.
Have you, you've been in law enforcement and security for over 40 years.
Right.
Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, I haven't. And it's interesting you say that, because I was doing some interviews this morning, and one of the big questions people were referring back to was early days of my career, late 70s, early 80s, when New York was just overtaken by crime. And leadership had to come in and actually make a decision that they needed to clean that up. And they did make those decisions. They made law enforcement actually a form of enforcing the law instead of being politically correct. And we saw a big change in that. I have never seen it like this. I have never, Kathleen, 41 years right now, I've never seen it like this. And I truly believe that it's that we can fix it, but we have to be willing to make the tough choices in order to do so. And political correctness is not going to marry with law enforcement. It's simply not going to happen.
So, I mean, do you think this is a result of the defund the police and all of the rhetoric and all of the political BS that has been going on in this country for the last, year plus?
I do. I think it's a combination of things, though. And you're absolutely on point relative to the comment about defunding police. There is a causal connection to that. But I think it predates that. I think we need to look at what really started this. When we went from the totality of this decline, we went from a sense of patriotism to a sense of entitlement in this country. That cultural change in our mores started a process, an incremental process that brought us to here. We've seen remarkable changes in numbers, but nothing like today. Now we start talking about, if we really talk about the escalation of violent crime in America, the increase in groups such as white supremacists, the NFAC out of Atlanta, and groups such as that, hate groups, hate crime, etc. Let's go back to what the day of the Floyd incident, and let's look what happened in this country culturally from that point forward. Let's look at what happened to police-related shootings. Let's look at what happened to lack of prosecution. And let's look at what the narrative has been in this country for the last 18 months relative to police work and law enforcement. And then, and only then, if we have a fact-based conversation, we would be able to at least harness the reality of where we are today and what needs to be done. Defunding police, to be real clear about this, do we need police reform? Yes. But we don't need just police reform. We need criminal justice reform, Kathleen. And I know that you and I have talked about this before, but we need criminal justice reform. You specifically, and I'm not just saying this because you know I'm a big fan. You were an integral component in this country for making stalking the crime that it is today, for waking people up in this country. Absent your efforts and others, clearly, absent two women that stepped up how many years ago, Kathleen, that said drunk driving is wrong.
Right.
Absent man, that wouldn't have happened. But what we have today, we have district attorneys who are an elected official that are hired to prosecute the laws that their state's legislature creates. We know that to be true. What they've done now across the country, and you talk about the great city of San Francisco, and you can talk about New York and a variety of other places, we have prosecutors, Kathleen, that have made conscious decisions to say, I'm simply not going to prosecute that crime or these crimes. What the hell kind of message do you think you're sending?
That was my next question to you is what the hell is with this no cash bail? Why would DAs even do that? And what kind of message is that saying to these criminals?
Kathleen, the message is plain and clear. It doesn't make a difference. If I get arrested, I'm getting out anyway. But to police, and here's the thing that really piggybacks on your point, Kathleen, is the police have to sit back and say, hey, look, do I even do this now? This crime is happening in front of me. I can arrest them, but they're not going anywhere. Why arrest them? And this is really at the core of our problem right now, relative to the decision DAs are making and relative to the decision on no cash bail.
But why do you think, what is at the core of those DAs? Gascon is a nightmare out of LA. We all know this. California, my beautiful, wonderful state that I grew up in, I love, I went to UCLA, is gone to shit. And,
right?
I just, why would the DAs do this? What would be the reason?
You know what it is? It's sort of like, I remember back in my DOD days where we were listening to directives coming out of Washington where we would have target bombing on terrorist sites, and planes right after that would be dropping food. Why? What are we doing? You can't fight a politically correct war, and you cannot be politically correct in enforcing the law. The laws are the law. We are a nation of laws. So why are DAs doing this? Because we're trying to be politically correct. We're trying to appease, as much as people don't want to hear this, it's the truth. We are trying to please people so they're not offended. And in making those decisions, we are compromising the safety of the general public. Because at the end of the day, and you know this better than anybody, especially with all the great things your company is doing right now and about to release, if cops don't show up, Kathleen, on 911 calls, where the hell are we?
Right. Well, and here's the other question about, I hear chatter out there that, shoplifters, I heard, well, they need it. They don't have money. This kind of crap. And the point is, aren't the very criminals that shoplift the ones that are going to go down the street and rob your house or do other crimes? I mean, crime is crime is crime. What do you think about that? Yeah.
Same people. I mean, Kathleen, think about it. To all your viewers and all your listeners, that really kind of abounds to the question of, if you know that whatever you're going to do is going to carry no ramification whatsoever, is there a deterrent from doing it? And you talk about the Neiman Marcus piece, and you're so right about that, 100%. But that's a microcosm of what's happening around the entire country.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got messages on Facebook from, because I posted that post yesterday about Neiman Marcus, and I had 3 cops say, "Oh my God, I'm in Missouri, and that's we arrest 30 people a day shoplifting like that." I mean, it's mm-hmm. rampant. It is. It's all over the country. It's not just there. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sense of entitlement, right? Sense of entitlement. And if you feel you're entitled, which is exactly the direction we've gone culturally in this country, then you're going to see a prolific increase in crime such as that. Look, remember when, it was a number of years ago, and you and I were doing my show back in New York, and we were starting to talk about rioting and protesting, right? Remember we were talking about that a while ago?
Yep.
Well, what's the difference? When we look at now, if someone has a hard time with what's going on in the public, we have professional rioters now, Kathleen, that come into cities to tear businesses apart, destroy them. After the Floyd incident, we had people that felt so entitled because they took advantage of a situation and said, we're going to burn down this city. We had politicians, for Christ's sake, in Portland. Moron Unlimited. Go ahead, burn the police department down, burn the city down. Let me give you a city block that you can tear down. Who the hell do you think you are? And when you look at these people in Neiman Marcus and the people that feel that they are entitled to loot, to break down somebody's business, I mean, we're built on small businesses, Kathleen. These are people that work hard, that go home at a kitchen table, they're trying to figure out what bills they're going to pay. Then you have these pieces of crap that feel that they can go destroy their businesses, set them on fire, loot them.
But you said something back. Now, are these, militia groups? Who are these hired, paid people to go during those riots, during those things? What kind of groups did you see kind of thread throughout that? All of the
great question.
Riots.
Great question. So 3 different levels. One, the organized group. BLM and Antifa were clearly the most organized of rioters. Now, I don't mean very specific. Not saying protesters, saying rioters. Protesters are people that have a God-given constitutional right to protest against whatever they feel they want to protest against in a peaceful manner. Everyone supports that. Every law enforcement officer supports that. Antifa, probably the worst of the bunch. But then we started to see the ultra-right come into play. And we started to see groups like in Charlottesville and other places, white supremacist groups, which, by the way, more than quadrupled, Kathleen, in organized number to the left side of the aisle. Then we saw the professional rioters. I know this sounds absurd, but we saw professional rioters, people that are paid to show up. How do we know that? So you look at an area that's being protested, and with surveillance cameras and well documented, you can see buses. I mean, Kathleen, how much do these buses cost, for God's sake? You're renting a bus for a week?
Right.
I don't have the money for that, you know? And
So that's it.
Buses.
Where is the money? Where is it coming from?
There's speculation about where it's coming from, but if the government has done an investigation, they haven't released that information as to where it's coming from. Sources that I have in law enforcement have told me that they have researched where buses have been leased from, and they come back to obscure LLCs with no real fingerprint attached. I think people know where it's coming from. They just haven't said it. Now, if that investigation ever came to a private sector company like mine, you can bet your ass I'm going to find out where they're coming from. But government hasn't figured it out yet, or have decided they haven't wanted to. But that's our second tier. Second tier are those that are organized. Organized, not part of groups, but organized so that they're paid to show up and riot, not protest. Big difference. And then you have people that genuinely want to speak out. Look, you and I talked about this. It was that day or the next day, right? After the Floyd incident, after Chauvin on the back of his neck. I remember you texted me saying, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And we were both appalled with that, as anybody would.
Well, and let me just tell the audience as well, you ran a whole police academy in Florida. So,
right.
you know what is
the training methods are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, and I remember when we were talking right after that happened, and we were both appalled and looking at how excruciating that was, what this guy did. And you're right. My last post was as the CEO of one of the largest police academies in America here in Florida. And with just over 400 souls reporting to me and running both basic and advanced training for well over 10,000 a year. This is the kind of thing that we trained not to do. And I know I'm dating myself, Kathleen. I'm not young like you are, but
right.
I mean, I was right there. I was right there during Rodney King. And we talked about this before, right? I was right there during Rodney King. I was a newly appointed commanding officer of a state police academy, 29 years old, and Rodney King comes. So it was throw the white guy who had a star on his shoulder in front of the camera and start talking. And what we learned from that was how egregious use of force could be and was without being properly regulated. The use of force matrix gave birth. Use of force training went across the country. Human diversity training was implemented that made sense. And we saw a dramatic difference. Money, to now your original point, Kathleen, money was put in, not taken out, to police training, to police selection, to police recruitment. And we saw a marketable difference. We went out and took the community and recruited from the community, so the demographic of the police department reflected that of the community. We're doing just the opposite now. We're 86% down in police applications, Kathleen.
Oh my God.
86%. Now, to all of your viewers, the question comes to this. You want to keep taking money out, that's fine. But own your decision. So that, God forbid, when someone comes trying to break into your house or assaults your child, and you get the message back saying, we're going to get there as soon as we can, or we'll send somebody tomorrow, or feel free to come into the police department to fill out a report. How are you going to feel that? Because 86% down in police applications. Let me tell you what that means. It means that not only do we not have the bodies today, it means that by cutting back overtime, and this is the business model, and I beseech everyone listening right now, please give me a second here. When we cut out overtime, which is what's happening, you're telling every cop that's suitable to retire, 20 years service or more, that would have stayed an extra 10. The more mature, more experienced police we want to keep. You're telling them they need to retire now because the retirement is based on their last year's income. So if you say no more overtime, you're taking a cop who may make $60,000 base salary and maybe double that with overtime. Now you've made it a math decision. So not only are police people not applying, but people are retiring in record number. How does that affect all of your viewers and listeners? There aren't enough cops to go around now. So with violent crime up, domestic violence through the roof, domestic terrorism, we can't even count how much we're trying to track that we're out of control on. Right. Cybercrime.
Well, cybercrime, that's...
Kathleen, there's no one we don't have the bodies anymore. That's what defunding is doing. That's the business model behind that.
So, then it goes to as well, this was my question to you, the gun violence. Why are we seeing so much more gun violence? And, why are some cities worse than others?
Well, I think the first question is, as far as gun violence, it's so much easier today because the manufacture and the sale of firearms, it's so much easier today to get a gun. That's number one. And number two, it is relatively, I don't want to say impossible, it's highly improbable to try to enforce the interstate commerce or the transportation of firearms between one state and another. There aren't border checks, there aren't gun checks at different borders. So if you buy a gun legally in one state and transport it to another, you're not going to stop that. And the millions of guns that are out there, it's just, Kathleen, it's a matter of math as far as how much we see there. The second part really kind of goes down to, as far as why, and that comes down to leadership. It really comes down to leadership. And I'm going to throw something out, and I would love to see what your viewers think about this. As unpopular as it is, which God knows, I don't care about, stop and frisk saved lives. Stop and frisk. We were at our lowest number of gun-related crime during stop and frisk. Lowest numbers. You know why? Because police were trained to identify suspicious activities of individuals and would stop, question, and frisk. And that produced a plethora, my word, not yours, so don't claim it.
Okay,
it produced a plethora of gun-related arrests. But Kathleen, we're not doing it. We don't want to offend anybody. Cops are so afraid to pull people over, Kathleen. They're just letting them go.
Well, I mean, do you blame them? I mean, look at Chicago. Oh God, I haven't talked to you since this happened today. It reminds me of, so my youngest son, who Ramsey, is at Michigan, and he's doing an internship, and this kid, a couple days ago in Chicago, a junior at I think University of Chicago, was doing his internship, riding back on the train, and some random bullet strikes him in the back of the head. He's paralyzed and on a life support tube, and he's able to communicate with his parents through eye blinking, and then they some kind of electric keyboard, and he was able to say, if this is how I'm living, I don't want to live, please take me off life support, and they did. And I think that's Ramsey coming home from his internship in Michigan, and some gangbanger, who the hell knows what is going on in Chicago, but it does go to leadership, and the blame game has got to stop. Gangs are going wild. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to ask you, do you believe of this skyrocketing blatant violence and, the gangsters just out on the street in New York. The one where the little kids are like diving and the guy's just shooting at the guy on the sidewalk. Broad daylight.
Right.
So, again, it goes to, we got to get back law and order. It might not be, popular. What are you going to send you're going to send a psychologist, a social worker out to kind of, feel out that guy that's shooting the other guy on the sidewalk, responding to that call?
Yeah, what's he going to talk you to death? Look,
Yeah.
You know what, Kathleen, that just breaks my heart when I hear that story, because you're a parent, I'm a parent. We think about that. That's just your worst nightmare, And I really hope everybody was listening to what you just said. For those that have children out there, grandchildren, think about that. Would you want to be in that situation? You talk about Chicago, and I will tell you that Chicago has a rich history of law enforcement, but it also has a very rich history, and unfortunately, very poor politics. People talk about the Windy City, and they think it's because of the wind off Lake Michigan. Windy City, they got their name because of the circling wind of politics in that city. Where we see the problem here is a lack of leadership. It's taking the enforcement out of law enforcement. I mean, look, we can talk about Chicago. We can talk about the macro level. Macro level is, we began this, Kathleen, when we started making it legal to be here illegally in this country. We made illegal immigration legal. And then we made people feel guilty about saying illegal immigrant. Then we moved to say, and this started what, 8 years ago, I think, with the stop, question, and frisk. There were far too many people of a certain demographic that were being stopped. It was discriminatory. We have to get rid of it. Okay, we got rid of it. Now we sit back and we're talking on the Safety Chick Show about why there is this overwhelming number of gun-related crime, because we stopped enforcing the law. And the only way we're going to get back to where we should be, and I don't know, and I say this, and I pray to God I'm wrong, but I don't know that we can. But the only way, if we ever have a chance of doing it, is going back to what works, and what works is enforcing the law. In trusting in the United States and that we are a country, a nation of laws. Our legislature we elect the legislature. They legislate the laws. Prosecutors and police enforce the laws. And if we don't get back to that, Kathleen, I, honest to God, have no idea how bad this is going to be.
Well, also, I mean, we talk a lot, I guess. We talked a lot about, and I just did a show last week with this amazing woman that started an Instagram page called Watch Out Philly, which is neighborhood watch on steroids. And the thing is it is multifaceted. Yes, we need to, enforce the laws, be back funding police, getting recruits, getting within the communities, as you always say, and recruit law enforcement that lives in the community, that knows the people in the community, combined with neighborhood watch. I mean, that Watch Out Philly thing is fantastic. It's women all over the streets of Philly, with guys, that predators or criminals that are grabbing or groping or doing all kinds of weird stuff. And the women all banded together and snapped a picture of a guy and then said, hey, this guy just did this to me. And then it goes up on the page. And then the next woman said, yeah, I saw him, last week do the same thing to this other woman at this street. So it's like, the barking chain. It's like, again, neighborhood watch on steroids.
Exactly.
I watched another thing where, North Hollywood has started up Crime Watch again, and they're civilians that are working with police, going undercover in unmarked cars, driving around looking for suspects, criminals in their town. I mean, they're banding together, also in Willits, California. And then there's the website Nextdoor, where people in their neighborhoods are able to say, hey, my house got broken into this. And so it takes a whole community and different angles that we all have each other's back. I mean, that's what it's going to take.
Right. Well, what we have to get back to is really the most simplest of things. And that's learning how to talk to each other, which we don't do. We really don't. We fail at that. When we talk about leadership, let's call it for what it is. The best, most efficient leadership that comes out of a community, Kathleen, comes from its informal leaders, not its elected officials. Because quite frankly, and here's a message to all the elected officials out there, far too many of you are more concerned with keeping your job than doing your damn job. That's the problem with them. And their agenda isn't necessarily for community first, it's for them first. It's a fact. Whether you like it or not, it's a fact. So if we want to start correcting the significant problem that we have in our communities, well, we need to start listening to the informal leaders, the people that own the delis and the barbershops and the restaurants, the people that are in, the churches or the mosques or the temples, the true community leaders. And we need to marry them with the true law enforcement leaders, not the police chiefs, but the cops that are interfacing with community. And we need to get to an environment where they can talk. That, if we can do that, then that's a great start. But the question is, are we going to do it? Because when we went through the Rodney King incident, the hardest time that we had was initially, and that was getting people to sit at the table. I remember, Kathleen, distinctly when we were putting town halls together where we couldn't get 10 people in a room. After about a year, they were overflowing. But initially, we couldn't get them. And we had to keep pushing and keep recruiting and keep recruiting. But it worked. And then when you start looking at a community that has a police department that looks like them, that speaks like them, that understands their cultural thinking, decision-making is different. Use of force is a fraction of what it is. And we start to look at, Kathleen, we've talked about this, start looking at cops and understand the biggest, most powerful tool that a cop has is their mouth. And if you don't have cops that have life experience and they roll up to a situation such as a domestic or anything else, and they don't know how to talk to people, well, how the hell are you going to do your job? I look at some of the young cops today, and I get a lot of, as you can imagine, I get a lot of cops writing in every day, to the office and through all different stuff of ours here. And I think one big common ground is that we have so many cops that have never even been in a fight in their life. They grew up on playing video games, not outside playing sport, not outside communicating. Well, being a police officer is all about communicating. And community, this is my last thing on this one. Community, you own this too. You think you can sit back and do nothing and wait for it to come to you? You are dead wrong, and it will never happen. Both of these two got to come together, Kathleen.
I totally agree. And so that was actually going to be my last question to you is, what is the most important, and you did just say it, but there might be something else in there that you didn't say, that what is the most important piece of advice you can give the listeners and viewers out there that they can actively do to help with this crime epidemic in their communities and in their cities and in their, their social world? What should and can they be doing?
Get involved, number one, and two, vote. So get involved in your community, and you know who the true leaders are in your community. You know who they are. Recruit them to be your voice. And you know who the cops are in your community that are good. You see them, you talk to them, you know who they are. Recruit them to sit at the table. You can do it. Every community can do it. Hell, go to the local restaurant, go to the local church, sit outside, have a barbecue. It doesn't have to be expensive. Talk to each other. That is the best, and I've done it before. It works. The second thing about this is vote. Look, I know you hear this a lot, but so many elected officials are in office that don't belong there. And we need to do a better job as the people at not only who we put in office, but holding their damn feet to the fire to make sure they do their damn job and calling them out when they don't, making them accountable. We are still the people, Kathleen. We need to do a better job at that. If we can do those two things, we're in the right trajectory. But I'll say real briefly, those stalking laws in this country would never have happened if you didn't go through what you went through on your own dime, by the way, with no support, no backup, no one was there to help you through it. You did it yourself. You found the right support. You took it out of your pocket and you made sure you stayed with it for years to make it happen. If it wasn't for you, you know as well as I do, there are millions of stalking victims that would have absolutely no law behind them.
Well,
You did it.
I appreciate you saying that.
You did it. You did it, though. But you did it. And I'm not saying, listen.
But what you're saying is, I hear you saying that, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. But you're right. What it took for me is I was outraged that this person was allowed to do this. There were no laws on the books that could put him away for a long time. The police would say, look, when Telly lays a hand on you, there's nothing we can do. So believe me, after he tied me up and took me out at gunpoint and kidnapped, and, thank God I escaped unharmed. Yeah, I was sitting there going, oh, hell no, this just can't be. So, you're right. That kind of, and I've had so many people on this show. As you know, this whole show is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all out of either tragedy or passion or, a crime happening to them. And, making life better for others, making, people held accountable. And, that you're exactly right. Where you were going with that is what it takes. You got to get involved.
You did it.
Or what's the alternative?
You were raising 3 kids and working full time, and you did it. So you want a message to the community? Follow your lead. They should follow your lead. All the people out there should look at what you've done, should look at what those 2 spectacular women did that started MAD, and all the other people that have made a difference in our country because they gave a shit. They didn't sit around talking about it and complaining about it. They did something. So if you really don't like what's going on, then step up and do something about it. And that's really the message. I follow what you did. I follow what other people like you have done. It's doable, Kathleen.
It is.
Living proof.
It is.
So
and
you know what the message is?
You start at the local level. You just started. That's where I started. I started at the local level. And you just keep plugging away. For true change.
You ended up on Capitol Hill, right?
Exactly.
Raising 3 boys.
And then let me say, on your end, on your side, all of your service, all the incredible work that you put in, and all the sacrifices that you made with your family, doing years of service with the country, trying to make things matter, and now what you do with Viollis Group International, security and safety for the public, people that are in tough situations, and you go in and handle those situations. And, that's the point, is it takes both sides. It takes the community, it takes law enforcement. So, that's what it is. By the way, I want to tell our viewers and listeners that you have a new book out. Would you like to talk about that?
I do. And you're in it.
I think you ripped off my entire chapter, but that's okay.
I did, but I footnoted the hell out of it.
You did. It's okay. I got a call from a mutual friend of ours, and he said, "Oh, I just got a whole case of Viollis's books for my clients and everything." He goes, "Yeah, and you're in it." I go, "Yeah, I know I'm in it."
Well, you know what? I don't know if you covered this yet, but the amount. Just all the work and research that you did on colleges, universities, and protecting kids when they go to college, right? That's my whole chapter in that area is so much about, what you, on all your research and everything you wrote about that. And obviously,
yeah, but there's way more. This book, you guys, for everybody listening out there, it's called Safeguarding America, and you can get it on Amazon and on Viollis Group. Viollis.com.
You go to Viollis.com and I'll sign it and send it to you. Yeah.
Wow. I don't think you signed. Oh, yeah, you did. I didn't recognize your signature at all. I'm not even sure you signed it. I think the dog signed it.
I did.
Okay.
It could have been. She's a good girl.
She's
a
very, very talented.
She's very sweet. Good puppy.
Anyway, hey, this is the first of many. Next time you got to come in studio.
I know.
This is crazy.
I want to be in studio.
All right.
I would do.
All right.
And you have such a great staff there.
I do. Great producer.
I know.
Exactly.
Right,
So,
she is.
for all you listeners and viewers out there, you can find all the information on Viollis.com. It'll be on my website, safetychick.com. Thank you so much for being here, and keep
Wouldn't
up
miss it.
your great work. Talk soon.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Okay, so, I always do Safety Chick rules after, but I just wanted to put up this statement and get people that listened and are watching to really think about change and what we talked about today. Because in order to have law and order in our cities, we must as a whole come together as a community to combat crime. Hey, city council members, mayors, DAs, they're all elected officials. If you don't like what's going on in your town, stand up and say something. Attend your city council meetings. Contact your mayor. Start a neighborhood watch program. Coming together as a community, having each other's back, and working with the police is the key to fighting the bad guys. Thanks for all your messages. Remember, you can find me at Instagram @TheSafetyChick, Twitter @TheSafetyChick, Kathleen Gallagher, The Safety Chick on Facebook, and safetychick.com. Till next time.
She's like the female James Bond.
She's Safety Chick.
The safety chick.
I love that safety chick. I mean,
She calls
own it.
herself the Safety Chick.
I was a stalking victim, having to learn every possible aspect of personal safety to stay alive.
The safety chick. We love her.
Yeah.